welcome.
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Welcome.
Oh, not shaking hands with everybody.
Yes. Pre-COVID, we all would have stood up and shook your hand, and welcomed you to the town of Adams. So we are happy that you're able to join us this evening. So thank you. Just a couple of logistical things. I did want to remind you this is a public meeting, so we do have an open line. Currently, we have members of the public who are on the call. Currently, we have 4 people on the call from the public. One is our town council. One is our administrative assistant. And we have 2 members of the public, Donna and Rena, who have joined us by phone. And as I stated, it is a public meeting. I am recording this. I don't mean to be rude, but I will have to be looking at the computer from time to time to make sure that things are working, and if there's anybody else who has to enter the room. I will do my best to notify you and the others in the room if anybody else should be joining us virtually. So just please, my apologies up front for that. Pre-COVID, I had many more manners than apparently I do now. But again, I just wanted to welcome you. My name is Christine Hoyt. We spoke on the phone on Monday. And again, thank you for accepting our invitation. I'd like, just for a moment, if all the members could go around the room and just give you their name. I know we have our nameplates, but instead of handshakes, it just seems to be the nice way to do that. So I'll start.
Hi, my name is Joe Novak.
Rick Williams. Jim Bush, Vice Chairman. John Wall. Jay Green.
All right, so now you know everybody in the room. All right, so Eric, I'm going to turn the video on you and not on me so that those who are following at home can see. And I will start with the opening question. So if you could just briefly and just generally tell us how your professional experiences and skills line up with the duties and responsibilities of the Chief of Police for the town of Adams, and what specifically makes you the right fit for our community.
I've been in this field for over 33 years. I spent the entire time building it. One of those, when I was a kid, I played basketball, so much to do with the cop. So you know, I've always wanted to do. When I did decide to go down this path, I was lucky enough to have some great mentors to point me in the right direction. With the guidance I need, show when I was backing off a little bit, and push me into unknown and uncomfortable areas. I worked my way up to patrolman. I originally started prior to Woonsocket. I started as a special officer in the town of Cumberland, which is the town I grew up in, Cumberland, Rhode Island. It's tough working in the town that you grew up in because you know everybody. And when you pull over people for DUI, and you've had coffee with them, it's a little uncomfortable. It's time to move on, kind of thing. Plus, I was young. I was looking for the city of violence. So I went to Woonsocket, had a great career there. I became full-time in 1992. I was with the gang task force. I was with I was an FTO. I was with the SWAT team. I did everything I could get my hands on to try to expose myself to everything I could. I had some fantastic mentors. Both my mentors came from there. One good chief there was Interim. He was fantastic. He was a Rhode Island State Trooper there on Interim. Interim basis, so I'd like to follow his footsteps someday and that kind of thing. I also had some great captains and lieutenants that had won on chiefs in Massachusetts, which I still rely on a regular basis. I've taken the classwork I can. I've jumped on every training I can as far as management. I've gone through FBI leader programs, gone through some of the command and control programs from Roger Williams University. Prior to starting my career, I was in college. I was 18, young and dumb. I was probably the only guy you ever see that's called canoeing. I was just having too good of a time. I wasn't ready to work at that point, so when I had the opportunity to become a police officer, life gets in the way. Met my wife. We had 2 great kids. My education went on the back burner. As my career, once I left Woonsocket, I went into other departments where I was the operations commander over in Lincoln, New Hampshire. Great opportunity to fold into the fall. There's nothing better than it. contrast, big difference than, working with soccer, any kind of field. That was nice, I learned a lot. I had a chief that was hands off, so I did everything from budgeting, to running the day-to-day operations of the department, to internal investigations, to discipline, it all fell under me. Unfortunately, my father was sick, had cancer, and I had to return home. It was a job I would like to have stayed at. You do what you have to do for family, and that's one thing, is my family's always been first, no matter what. Even though it put my career on hold for 2 years, it was something I needed to do. Went to, for a couple of months, to Franklin, New Hampshire. That was just to hold me over, because the goal was to go to Colorado. My wife had a career opportunity up there. Went out to Colorado. I was certified, went to the academy out there. Had a job with one of the sheriff's departments, which I thought was a great opportunity to go along with my wife's great opportunity. 3 days before the moving truck came, my kids had a breakdown, and I packed up my truck and lost my deposits and everything I had invested in out there, the house and everything else. Drove back and started over. Ended up in Vermont, had a great opportunity there as a sergeant. I was hired as a sergeant. They had a gang problem, that was my background, so it was a perfect fit. You know, one last, when you say that gangs in Vermont, they picture college walking down the street with chains hanging from their neck, it's like a stereotype kind of thing. It's not that, it's the real deal out there, which I was surprised at. So I enjoyed that, but Vermont as a whole at the time, wasn't very active in that. So I was able to get that going there through training. Most departments had no idea what they were looking at. I took the initiative, I started a intelligence group throughout the state. It ended up growing to the point where we were able to push through some legislation, to actually have gang training included in the academy. Same kind of stuff I was dealing with, you know, Vermont was dealing with around, we had street gangs, motorcycle gangs everywhere. I actually know a lot of gang members from this area, Pittsfield, North Adams, Hills Angels, and the rest of them. It's a fact of life, it really gets in everybody, day to day, it's troublesome. I got to the point where my kids were, done with school, they had made their decisions, and I followed up on the promise I always made myself, go back and finish up my education. I went back to school, got my bachelor's degree at my 50s. Probably a waste of money, I hope not, but, I'll probably be paying it off until I leave this earth. Kind of late this decade, but it was something I felt was important, something I promised my mother to be pushing back. She was an educator, so it was always, when you go back to school, you know, I thought it was important for my career. So, it was important for her, it was important for my kids. To look at that and say, listen, dad gets his education, maybe someday they'll go back and do it themselves, at least finish up. Had an opportunity to become a chief here in Massachusetts. I was here for a year and 5 months. The community as a whole was fantastic. I really had a strong connection with them. Spent a lot of time with the seniors. That's what I like about the small community as opposed to the city, because I could slow it down a little bit. We didn't have a lot of kids, anyway, 9 kids, so I couldn't take care of that aspect of it with the seniors, which is very important because of my mother. She was the director of senior services for years. So, we got a strong connection, community outreach with the seniors. Council on Aging up there for all the luncheons. I was well received there, and I know they definitely have a place in my heart. There were some great people there. Enjoyed it. We also I started a Good Morning senior program to check on our seniors. They would call in between 8 and 10 o'clock on weekday mornings and say, hi, this is Beth, I'm alive. All is right with the world. And it wasn't just to check on, it was an opportunity to have a conversation with them. A lot of them were not leaving the home at all. They didn't have any family, that's why they're involved to begin with. They lived by themselves. Prior to that, they were days without any contact. So the morning program, even if it was a 15-minute, sometimes it would become a half hour, they took your ear off, but they were fantastic. It was a great program. It was something I was very proud of. And it got to the point where I left the department. It conflicted with my personal and professional ethics, so it wasn't a place I could stay. I found it necessary to leave. I notified them I'd be leaving at the end of my contract, and I retired. time to think about it, because I love what I do. I figured I'd be going out the door with me first. So we're leaving 55, like, well, maybe it's time, but I've been off for, well, almost a year now, but for the first 6 months before this popped up, it was nice for a month. I rode my motorcycle a lot. I spent a lot of time with my granddaughter, which was fantastic. The greatest thing, you know, that's even better than my kids, my granddaughter's awesome. But this is what I miss. This is what I love to do. This is something I'd like to come back to. I feel like I have the skills and skill sets that can come to use. I know, like I said, some of the drugs that we dealt with, came to us about that. I'm still skilled. I know I've checked the ID. Some of the gang problems we had came out of this general area. I think that knowledge and my skill set would be a nice fit. I think I still have a lot to offer the troops inside the department. I 33 years of knowledge, I could be able to teach someone something along the way.
Well, thank you. Just with the windows open, the traffic is a little loud. Those who are on the call, are telling me that they can't hear anything. So I'm gonna move that speaker that is near Joe. I'm gonna put that on your table. I'm gonna come near you to do that. And I just asked that the other board members, you'll get it? I'll just ask that the other board members, speak loudly, but to allow us to have people also, still have some comfortable air in the room. And we did wipe down that table and that bottle of water before you came into the room, so feel free to. All right, Joe.
You might walk the top with it though, so drink it.
I brought my own anyway.
Yep.
Try to plan ahead.
Good.
Once again, my name is Joe Novak, and, as I told the other candidates, thank you for throwing your hat into the ring. We appreciate that. And, before I ask my first question, I was looking at your people that, wrote letters on your behalf, and one of them was Sean Boyne.
Yes.
And I think Sean was, one of our applicants that we discussed, so I think that was a nice touch on behalf of both.
He's been a very big supporter. He's
Yeah.
a very knowledgeable guy.
Yeah. Okay, this is, my question. I'm just gonna read it once. I usually read it twice, but sometimes it gets cumbersome, so I'll read it slowly so you can digest it. And it goes as follows. In light of the ongoing protests taking place throughout our nation and abroad regarding the death of George Floyd by overzealous law enforcement personnel, do you see policing tactics and racial stereotyping continuing? Will the powers that be relent, or will the same situation arise again? I ask this because there have been other racially charged and egregious actions undertaken by police officers, resulting in the unwarranted deaths of Black Americans. Still, nothing has transpired to curb these happenings. Please expound on your views and discuss how racial profiling can finally be put to rest. I strongly believe that all lives matter, regardless of the color of one's skin or any other attributes which one possesses. The world is big enough to accommodate everybody if the blinders are allowed to be removed.
First off, when I saw that on TV, especially being retired, that was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my entire career. I've spent time in bigger departments, small towns. I have never in my entire career seen anything like that. That was hands down the most disgusting thing. And what's worse is he was the FTO of one of those gentlemen that was there. So, that's an internal problem that needs to be addressed for the department itself. How someone with that many complaints and that kind of attitude towards police work is training the next generation of officers. There's a major disconnect somewhere along the line. Whether they could get him out of there by the union or not, that's something they can control. There have been unnecessary deaths and abuses on minority communities as a whole. Most of that has gotten better over the years, dating back to Rodney King and even prior to that. I remember as a kid seeing the Rodney King beating taking place. again, disgusting thing, and I was new to the job back then, you know, I was still working part-time. And I'm thinking to myself, is this what law enforcement is? It's not what I was raised as, it's not what I saw, it wasn't the respectful career I believed it was. There have been bumps in the right direction over the course of the years, but I can understand the frustration of the minority and Black communities because there is not enough, a bump doesn't cut it. You need to have some major progressive movements, some major moves forward to correct some of these things. Some of the same problems that existed in the beginning of my career are the same ones that exist now, you run into. They say there are problems, like Mr. Chauvin was, the union was too strong and they couldn't get him out of there. Well, that happens today in most departments. They say that that nepotism is an issue. You know, they're passing on some of the great candidates and they're hiring guys that, well, my uncle is a captain kind of thing. That's not how you hire people. You always hire, I was raised, you always hire the most qualified for the position. Not who you know, it's what you know. It should never be who you know. They also don't recruit enough in the minority communities. I went to the academy with an African-American male who's a good friend of mine. We became friends in the academy. I worked with him in soccer for 10 years, and I still keep in touch with him now. There was a movement in the 90s and early 2000s where, after some of the events, they were looking to bump up numbers of officers from the minority communities. And their answer was to lower the standards. Their claim was that they're not getting the same educational benefits. They're carrying criminal charges, even misdemeanors, so they're allowing certain misdemeanors to be passed. They're allowing educational standards to be dropped, and that's where we run into a problem. He was upset with that. And he and I used to do a walking beat all the time at night. We used to walk in, it was a grant because we had open drug dealing when I first started there. So we would walk at night from 12 o'clock till 4 in the morning. We got to chat it up a lot. And he was disgusted by that. His big view on that was, everyone's telling us that, he goes, as an African-American, you're telling me that I'm stupid. I can't get the good grades. So you're gonna lower the standards and bring me through the door because I'm not smart enough. Dave was very smart. The gentleman has nothing to do with, he grew up in the housing projects. He had to face some of the same issues that people face today. But he worked his way on. It has nothing to do with that. As long as you keep dropping the standards, if you're dropping the standards for that, you're also dropping it for everyone else. So we started bringing these knuckleheads through the door that, you know, my dad's a captain, and they just barely passed the test, so they've had drug usage in the last 6 months. When I was trying to become a cop, you made sure you didn't smoke pot, you didn't do anything, because I knew that's where I wanted to be. You know, I wanted to be a cop someday, and I knew you couldn't get on the job. If you said you smoked pot, or if you smoked pot, if you took a lie detector test and flunked it because of that, that's it, your job is done. Now they're allowing, some departments are allowing people on the job, well, you haven't used cocaine in the last 6 months. That's ridiculous. That's where your problem officers come from. Departments need to keep reaching out and having contact with the minority communities. We don't do a good enough job with it. My friend said, you know, also, he goes, what they were doing is trying to increase minority status in the department and saying, well, the department as a whole should reflect what the community is. Well, you also have to have a connection to the community. He would go back into the housing projects and it wasn't a problem, but there were other African Americans that were hired after him and they would put them in housing projects in those areas as their beats. Well, that's not fair to the officer because you're not allowing him the same rights as every other officer in the department because you're getting stuck in some of the worst areas. As you get farther on, you want the north end where it's a lot easier and you're handling parking tickets, you know, when you're 20 years on the job. But they're still not being accepted because they know darn well you're not from there. So you're no different. You know, even my buddy, we go into the project and he would have all kinds of names thrown at him that he was frustrated. It's a matter of just keep reaching out, getting out there and doing a better job of it. And the white officers need to get out there and do the same exact thing. It's about transparency, it's about accessibility. If you can get out there and let yourself know, say, listen, I'm Erik, this is who I am. I'm doing the gangs. I did that for most of my career in Woonsocket. Gang activity takes place in low-income areas. And unfortunately, due to socioeconomic problems, minorities make up a large percentage of the lower income areas. I never once in my entire career had a complaint made against me because I treated everybody respectfully. I gave everyone a fair shot. I spoke to everybody like a human being and treated them like a human being because I expected the same thing back. Even when I arrested them, they weren't happy. I don't care what color you are, what background you are, what sex you are. You're never going to be happy when you're arrested. But during all that time, I never had one complaint filed against me for that. So I'm obviously doing something right, and I've always found it important to get out there and do that kind of thing. That's why I think, like I said, 33 years on the job, I think I have something to teach the younger group. It's not about going out there and writing X amount of tickets or putting up numbers. I think that's a big mistake departments make, is putting up stats. It becomes a competition. I don't care if you made 20 arrests, I want 20 good arrests. I'd rather have you make 2 good arrests and 18 positive contacts. And you've got to do that in all the communities. So we will get there eventually. I don't think the movement to defund everything right now is the answer. I think we need more training, not less training. If you take that money away, it's got to come out of something. And I'll tell you, 9 times out of 10, it comes out of training budgets.
Okay, well, thank you, and I just want to make one comment that you brought up, and I've been a pet peeve of mine, that when we contract with our police department, we can't get them to have random drug checks. They just won't go for it, and I just always thought that that was wrong, because when you're in law enforcement, you should be abiding by the law. Not to say our officers are doing drugs, but it seems to me that if you weren't doing things that you weren't supposed to, you'd be more than happy to say, well, yeah, I'll be happy to take a random drug test. But that's just my thought. So I wanted to bring that in because you had mentioned that.
Randoms are tough, but I looked through the contract, and your drug and alcohol policy in the contract is phenomenal. I was really impressed with that, because I've worked in departments where I've had, back when I was in Woonsocket, I had, one of my brother officers show up half in the bag.
Well,
I think that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next. Good. Identify and discuss your experience in creating, reviewing, and assessing law enforcement policy and procedure, agency directives, or general orders.
When I worked in Lincoln, I was one of the co-managers of the CALIA certification program for the department. Those not familiar with CALIA, it's standardized best practices accepted nationwide for police departments. It's a great program. It decreases liability for departments, gets everyone on the same page, makes sure that your people know the best thing to do in these certain situations. It cuts down on some of the racial overtones that you can find in policies at times. It cuts down on nepotism, misuse, all kinds of things. In the tools that you're using, carrying the tools we have is a great responsibility. And having policies for those tools, it's not easy to say I have a use of force policy and add in beanbag gun and taser and expandable baton and a handgun. You need to separate each one so everyone knows what you're going to use in what situation. Officers need to be able to think for themselves. You can't take that away from them, but they need to have some kind of guideline that Adams is using, that North Adams is using, that Pittsfield is using. So I think certification is good for any department. In Lincoln, I spent a lot of time doing that, and what we did is we went over our policies. The best practice for policy creation, once you have them, is to review them every 3 years, whether they need it or not. You take it out, you dust it off, you go through it from beginning to end. You go through every bit of it, make sure it meets the best standards of what's happening this year as opposed to 3 years ago, or even 2 years ago. Because things do change, and if it doesn't change, that's fine. You put it back in the box, and you put a date on it, and you revisit it again in 3 years. So 3 years is the timeline. But you pull it out, you compare it to what's being done, what the chiefs of police is putting out. They're changing things all the time. Okay, you need to look at this and change this. You also need to make sure it meets your state laws. Laws change all the time. The disorderly conduct charges I used to make 30 years ago in Rhode Island, I can guarantee you are worded a lot differently than they are now. So you need to make sure they're up to speed. Again, it reduces liability. So I spent a lot of time doing that. I would make the corrections, I would submit them, we would get them signed off on, and they'd go into the policy book. I was in the process of starting that in Egremont. Some of the policies were sold, the papers were different color. It's long overdue, and they were outdated. You read them and officers need to know what's expected of them. And if they don't have a policy for that to show them how to do things, that certain things, they're not gonna understand that. Same thing with rules and regulations. I'm a big advocate for rules and regulations in a department besides the policies and procedures. One tells you how to do something, one tells you what needs to be done. You won't have a policy about wearing a uniform, but you might have a rule of regulation on what's to be worn, what's allowed on a uniform and what is not, how it's supposed to be worn, where your car is supposed to be parked, that kind of thing. The policies usually deal with larger scale items, uses of force, defensive driving, high-speed pursuits, handling domestic violence calls, that kind of thing. So I think it's necessary. I spent a lot of time with both of those. I like rules and regulations. When I got to Egremont, that was one of the first things I did was push through it. It had already been looked at by the board. No one ever did anything with it, so I pushed it through. Since they had a 5-day window to sign off on it, respond to it, they didn't, so I pushed it through. The guys weren't happy about it, but it's something to help guide them down the path and let them know what's expected of them. I think it's important to have both.
How much experience have you had working with a collective bargaining unit? What do you consider the essential elements of effective labor management relations?
The biggest thing is that both sides need to be heard. I've worked with, I hate to keep bringing it up, but that's my background. Some of the departments I've worked in the past, Rhode Island, Woonsocket had a fantastic policy, a very strong union. Unfortunately, it was too strong. There were officers that were protected that shouldn't have been. It happens all the time. It's not unique to that city or anywhere else. I never served on the board. I was a voting member. I never served on the board. I didn't write anything. I voted on things only. On the administrative end of it, that's what I live off of. Even when I worked in Vermont as a sergeant, I had to consult the contract and make sure my I's were dotted and my T's were crossed. And I didn't get called into the chief's office by the end of the week saying, what the heck were you doing? You're ordering this officer in, or you're telling this officer to do that and they can't do that. The contract says that. You need to be aware of it. So you need to take the time to understand it and figure out where they're coming from. I had asked for a copy of the one for Adams. Like I said, I think it's a fantastic document. It protects both sides. It is very well written. There's obviously strength to it, and unions have strength. There's nothing you can do about it. Unions are supposed to protect those that are being taken advantage of. Unfortunately, my experience over the years has been there's too much time invested in taking care of some of the bad officers, and some of the good ones kind of get lost in the shuffle. But like a Chauvin kind of officer, if you can't get rid of that officer and take him out of there regardless of what they've done, the department owns that problem. You know, Minneapolis, my understanding is the chief is pretty squared away. The department as a whole is pretty good. Obviously, there's some flaws if he's the FTO, but the department, an agency that big, there are going to be some holes. You plug as many as you can. But he shouldn't have been on the job. There's no doubt in my mind he shouldn't have been on the job. There was a shooting he was in years ago prior to that, which were questionable, you know, because you point a shotgun at me, I have a right to defend myself. So whether he was one of 5 involved or not, but some of the other things he was accused of were pretty serious, and he shouldn't have been there. You need to have something in place to take him out of there. Again, union strength is tough. It's tough.
Thank you. What training and experience do you have in developing and implementing services and programs, courses, and/or learning objectives that incorporate diversity?
Well, a perfect example is one of the biggest things they did. I taught the introduction to gangs and intelligence at the academy. That was the course that we pushed through in legislation. I was the first instructor there. I created the program. You're dealing with minority communities, but 90% of what I taught involved minority communities. And I had 30 officers from around the state. Vermont's a predominantly white state, but I still had at least 20, 30% that were minorities. And you need to be able to have that conversation openly and freely and respectfully. never once had a complaint from any of the minority officers in the group saying, listen, the way you're speaking about this is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this. The references you're making. You can have conversations and open people's eyes to things. Some of these people, young officers, never left a town of 2,000 people, but they're gonna go work in Burlington. Burlington's a very diverse community. So, even though racism is very alive and well, unfortunately, and Vermont has more than a share of it, like I said, it's predominantly white. It's stuck in the past. They're coming around. Burlington's doing very well. Rutland's doing very well. Bennington's doing well, that kind of thing. But these officers want to become, you need to open their eyes to different things. Get them to understand that everybody's the same. I don't care what color you are, what sex you are, what religion you are. The person next to you is the one who probably saved your life, so you better get your head around this and learn how this works. It doesn't matter where they come from. It doesn't matter what color they are. If someone's fighting with you, and this is the person that's going to jump in and help you, you probably should have been nice to them right along, because they don't care what you said to them. Just like the officers going out to protest right now. They're getting screamed at. They're being called all kinds of things. And they're standing there with calm. I look at that and I'm infuriated being, watching it on TV. These officers are staying there nice and calm. They're doing what they have to do. They're being professional. Because they know there are problems, and these people have a right to be heard. No matter what the protest is about, whether it's related to race, whether it's related to amendment rights, whatever the case is, everyone in this country has the right to protest. Everyone in this country has the right to be heard. So that was one of the big things I took a lot of pride in with that gang class, is that I was able to open some young officers' minds, get them to understand we're all on the same page. And you better learn to get along with everybody, or you're not going to make it. I don't want people hesitating because I made a comment to them that was racist and upset them, and I'm getting my butt kicked, and they're looking at it saying, oh, maybe 5 more seconds before I jump in. They better learn how to deal with people.
Excellent.
So Eric, just, my question is about budget. So, just a frame of reference and some rough numbers, the police department's budget is about $1.8 million of the town's $16 million budget. So if you could just, identify for us and discuss your budgeting experience, knowledge, and skill set.
Sure. Going back when I was the operations commander, I was involved in 2 budgets while I was there. I wrote both of them. I spent a lot of time in front of the Board of Selectmen negotiating some of the things we need. My chief at the time was from a much larger city where when they ordered cars, they would order, as an example, they'd order 100 at a time. So when they did their budgets, they'd ask for 120. They only needed 100. And they would negotiate those 20 away and say, okay, I got to where I need to be. I got the 100 cars I need. That's cheesy. I'm not a big fan of that kind of thing. So when we were there, we needed 2 cars. We're a small department. We were 9 full-time, 3 part-time. We needed 2 new cars, and it was suggested that we had, I filled out the budget, and I had estimated at 2 new cars for the budget. That's what we need. And I was told to change that. Again, I don't agree with that. Every time I've done a budget, I've only asked for what I needed. There are a lot of things I want. There are a lot of really neat things out there, that would make everyone's life a lot easier. There's a lot of training out there that could expand an officer's career, but might not apply to the department. So why invest in that kind of training? It needs to, a search and rescue group, Pittsfield. Well, you're not on the side of a mountain, so it's really not gonna do any good in Pittsfield. So I've always been very big on asking for what I need only. I also did that in Egremont, and I came in halfway through my first year. I had half of what was left of a budget that was pretty established. We came in with a late submittal. I think it was $110 from the local dry cleaner that was never taken care of by the officers, so we were 110 over. But that was already in play for 7 months before I got there. And my final year, I came in under budget. So, not huge, we're not gonna go buy new cars with that. But kept an eye on it. Overtime budgets get eaten up fast, especially when you're short. Try to be creative. If you're allowed to use the contract you have in front of you, you can accomplish a lot of great things. The order-in clause, I think, is fantastic, as long as it's used. You know, I wasn't allowed to use that in Egremont, even though it was on the books. You give me a tool, I'm going to use it. So, but that's, I've written 2 of them, New Hampshire, and I wrote the one in Egremont.
Okay, this will be my final question. As a lifelong resident of Adams, I've witnessed the evolution of our police department. I vividly remember as a young man, the officers walking the streets and addressing you as you pass by. The nightly rounds to stores to check on their security. The writing of tickets for expired parking meters. In short, the Adams Police Department had a visible presence, and you knew who they were. Times have changed. They always do. No longer do the town's police officers walk the beat. They drive their cruisers to accomplish their tasks. No longer do they check stores after closing. Instead, they shine a spotlight on the business facade and move on. No longer do they write parking tickets for meter violations. We needed to add a town position to make this transaction. I must admit that I cannot put a name to a face of all of our police officers. What is your take on policing, which I term resident friendly?
It's funny that you say walking beats. When I started my career, I walked Main Street in Woonsocket. We did a 4 and 2 like you do here. I spent my first 2 days walking Main Street with a partner, and it was great. You know, at first I'm like, geez, I want to get in the car, I want to get going, I want to get in the car chase, I want to go to the big calls. And we referred to them as dinosaurs. They were the guys on their way out. Said, no, slow it down a little bit, learn how to do this job properly. You know, learn who people are, learn what they're doing, when they're doing it, why they're doing it. And you'll get to know the community. So when you hear a bang in the alley at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know it's Mr. Smith opening up the coffee shop, because that's what he does at 4 o'clock, Monday through Friday, is open up his coffee shop. So I'm a big proponent of walking beats within reason, as long as I wouldn't dedicate one unless the department's big enough. And I don't think Adams is at that stage. You have a decent sized amount of manpower, but I don't think you have enough to dedicate a full-time walking beat. But I would expect officers to get out of the car and walk on a regular basis, and not just Main Street, because it's not just the businesses that are paying me bills. I walked with my buddy Dave during the grant money. I loved it. I walked around. I knew the back alleys and the houses and all the bars. I knew everything. There was a 10, 12 block area, and we knew every inch of that, and that's by walking around. And I think it's important. I would think some of the side streets that I was going through and taking a look, my wife and I were here on the motorcycle the other day, taking a look around. She loves it up here. The view is beautiful. In downtown, she likes the old look of it. But you need to get out there. You need to get out on some of these streets and walk around and have a conversation. We've gone to cars because numbers of officers have been cut back and volumes of calls have gone up. So you need to cut down. I mean, when I started, we used to bang out, each car would bang out 20 to 30 calls a night per car. 1 million cars, that adds up. So you don't have a lot of time to get out of the car and walk.
Excuse me,
Sure.
you said bang out, where were you talking
I'm
about?
sorry.
Woonsocket?
I'm sorry, yes, it was called the call.
Yeah.
So you need to complete them, and it was everything from, you know, quality of life issues, barking dog, my neighbor's music's too loud, to domestic assaults, robberies, shootings, whatnot. So you need to keep moving. Car's the one that's gonna get you there. But we still have time, you know, sometimes I think officers kid themselves that they're too busy. There are times you need to have some downtime and have a conversation with another officer. You know, we don't get coffee breaks, but when you see the car side by side and the 2 officers chatting, 5 minutes, drinking a coffee, having a conversation, decompress a little bit, I think that's great. When those same 2 cars are there, half hour, 45 minutes later, you obviously have time on your hands. So if that's the case, when you have this little time to get out and start doing some of these things. I'm all for the coffee and the conversation, especially as a supervisor. That's how you get to know your officers, and you can keep an eye on them. You don't get to see them at roll calls, to really talk to them. At the end of the day, they're running out the door, they want out. I did my 8 hours, and I don't have to do forced overtime, so I'm out of here. But you're not, as a supervisor, you have the responsibility to keep an eye on these officers, and make sure that PTSD is not becoming an issue, make sure their family life is okay. There were times guys that I was very close with, worked with, were separated, and I found out 3 months after they were separated. So obviously, if I'm a friend of theirs and I'm pretty tight and I don't know what's going on, my supervisor definitely didn't. But yeah, I do believe we need to get out in public and be seen. All communities, all times. Community policing over the years has always been, that's our way to meet the public. And I think you can ask 30 different police officers from 30 different departments what community policing means, and you will get a different answer every single time. I've seen a transition over the years from going into the housing projects and cooking hot dogs and hamburgers in your uniform and handing them out for free, and everybody eats your food and has your chips, and you have conversation for a half hour or so, and you pack up the grill and call it a night, and 20 minutes later, after you're done, you're back there because someone's shooting and assaulting. So you haven't made an impact. But I think if you're in these areas at a regular basis, if the public gets to know who you are, in the gang unit, everyone knew who I was. And even when I moved to New Hampshire, I was at the gas station, the Shell station, right on Main Street in Lincoln. And all of a sudden I hear, Officer Eric. And it was this Asian male, it was a Laotian male that used to run around with LOC, with the street gang. His name was 8 Ball, and I turned around, he's in the car, and he's yelling at me, what are you doing up here? He didn't know I left, but he remembered me. I had been gone probably 3 months. Had no idea that I had left, but he saw me at a gas station in Lincoln, New Hampshire, 4 hours away, and said, I got to talk to him. I think that was pretty cool. I knew I made an impact, so you need to get out there, and I expect the officers to get out there.
Thank you very much.
The Adams Police Department works closely with the Adams Fire Department, the Adams Forest Wardens, EMS, Regional Emergency Management, and State Police, as well as community-based organizations. What has made you an effective collaborator in your current or past jobs?
I've always enjoyed talking to the other agencies. I hate going back all the time, but, the firehouse in the area I patrolled in Woonsocket, I was tight with the firemen there. I would stop and talk to them at the beginning of the shift and have a conversation. When Thanksgiving would come around, they'd cook Thanksgiving dinner, and I would have an open invitation, because I was a young guy, I'm working Thanksgiving one way or another, to go up and have dinner with them, and they welcomed me, and I could bring my family if I wanted. My kids loved it, because my oldest son used to volunteer fireman. He loved fire trucks since he was a little kid, so he thought it was the greatest thing. And Dad's working, Dad's a cop. Things are cool. But it was a great relationship with them, and I always did that because that's how you get things done, is having relationships with these other agencies. You can't ignore Public Works. Public Works says, hey, listen, can you give me a set of blue lights to, protect my guys for 15 minutes while we take care of this problem? You say no, or you drag your feet doing it, that's gonna come back to bite you, because all of a sudden you have a flood in the street and your officers are going call to call, and you need barricades. Public Works is gonna bring you the barricades, and if you say, listen, can you get some barricades out here? My guys are standing in the pouring rain, we need to move on to the next call. And they say, man, let me think about it. It doesn't work, you don't accomplish anything. It has to be one big team. We need to reach out beyond the town of Adams itself, the state police. Anytime you can get a state police cruiser or a cruiser from another agency, in Vermont, we have sheriff's departments that would come through, state police come through. Anytime you could get an extra car to come through to augment what you already have out there, that's a great day, that's a win, that's a free car. Because they're not gonna drive by the accident, the assault, or whatnot, they're gonna jump out and they're gonna take care of the problem, and if it's yours, you take care of the accident when you get around to it. It's nice to have the extra manpower. It's nice to be able to serve the public the way they should be served. And they like seeing the extra cars too. If you have an agency where, you have a lot of conflict with state or with the local sheriff's department or whatever the case may be, and they don't come to your town, that's noticeable. They pick up on that. Geez, I see them in Cheshire, I see them over in North Adams, I see them in Pittsfield. How come they never come to Adams? That speaks to the kind of department you have here, if that's the case. I don't see any problems with it. I've never heard anyone say anything, the time I've been here, say anything bad about Adam. They seem to work together well. The chief was a great guy. I met him a few times, had some nice conversations with him, and I think you really have a loss, you know, with him retiring. It's tough, like I said on the phone. I think he's gonna get 6 months into this and say, what the heck did I do? But, 'cause I miss it, you know, I could see him doing, he's that kind of cop. So, I think it's important to have these great relationships. And I'll tell you, the fire department, on the weekends, you go to the churches for the pancake breakfast. And you go to the fire departments in the afternoon for the steak fries. No one cooks a steak better than the fire. I have always been to those. It's a great way to go. So it's important. And we look good. It's their event, but they see their officer there. They see their chief there. They see command staff there. So it's a win-win for everybody.
And thinking about the regional collaborative nature of the police chief position, what is your experience working with the district attorney's office?
I did work with Cassiavelli on an issue I had in Egremont, and he was fantastic. He was short-lived, but he was great to deal with. He had a solid head on his shoulders. He understood what you were asking of him. Never an issue if I had a question, obviously being new to the state, I've learned a lot of laws in a lot of states, and they were different everywhere. It was nice to be able to pick up the phone and have someone in his office, if not him himself. A lot of times, during the day, he would answer it himself if one of the CPAC troopers wasn't available. So he was fantastic to deal with. Working up in Vermont, the county attorney, they were in our office all the time. They're the ones that read our reports, prosecute our reports, and need to know what's going on with our reports. They can't stand in front of a judge with, it's not even so much the spelling errors, it's, you know, probable cause left out, you know. So we were always open to that. They came and went, they had the key to the code to the back door and came and went as they pleased. You have to work closely with them, that's how you get things done, especially when you have your larger crimes. An unattended death is one thing, but when it's a murder, when it's a felony assault, it's nice to be able to pick up the phone and get them down there themselves. And a lot of times they will. I don't know how, I wasn't here long enough and I didn't deal with those kinds of crimes in Egremont. So I don't know if Cassiavelli would have come out at, 3 in the morning if I had a murder. Would like to think he would. But at the very least, he had a very strong CPAC group that I was confident with them coming out. So I think you need to work together just like with everyone else. They are the ultimate, law enforcement authority. They're the ones prosecuting, so you need to have them in the pocket and move forward, get things done. If you argue with them, you're not going to make any progress.
The position of police chief requires a high degree of accountability. What does accountability mean to you in a legal sense with regard to data and metrics in terms of relations with the community?
If you're not making progress, it's going to show. If you're not addressing the needs, it's going to show. We've done I'm sorry, I can't remember the term for it, but it's basically running statistics, being able to predict problems and problem areas based on calls in the past. We get times a day, so we're moving our groups into those areas. Say Thursday between 12 and 4 is a big problem for assaults or break-ins because the school's letting out and kids banging the schools, the homes on the way home. So we're able to predict that. It was a program that I wish, I'm drawing a blank because you didn't ask me, I would have been able to tell you. But it's a program that New York actually started years ago. It's a prediction model. If these things don't work, it's going to show, and they're going to wonder why things aren't working. So accountability as a whole, from the accountability standpoint, everything I've ever done, I've stood up for. Anything my people have done under me, I've stood up for. If I told them that if they're off the rails doing their own thing, well, they're going to have to answer for themselves. But if I have a group of officers that I know are supposed to be walking the beat at night and they're not doing it, that's on me. Just because they don't want to do it means I'm not doing my job making sure they get out there. So I take accountability for everything I'm involved in. And I've even taken accountability for some of my officers, because I think at times some of the things that are being picked on are minimal, so I would rather get yelled at by the lieutenant for 5 minutes than take the heat myself instead of my officer who's young and trying, and destroy them. I would rather build their confidence and build them as an officer, as long as it's nothing serious. But, you know, I have broad shoulders. I've been called everything in the book over my career. I can handle 5 minutes of screaming.
So, Eric, we've been talking for, that's about an hour, right? Or, yeah. So I wanted to just ask you if there's anything that you wanted to share with us that maybe we didn't ask you directly, and you wanted to make sure that you didn't leave this room without sharing that piece of information with us or experience that you might have. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity.
No, I'm an open book. I have a habit of talking too much. I'm sure some of my answers are long-winded. This is who I am. I don't pretend to be who I'm not. So whatever questions you've asked, I've answered 110%. If you have any others, I'll be more than happy to answer them at any time. I figure I'm straightforward. I am not always approachable, but, you know, it's big, bold, 6'3". I have a habit, unfortunately, of bothering people and intimidating kids, but I consider myself an outgoing person. I'll talk to anybody, anytime. So if you have any questions after this, feel free to, you know, send them to me. I'll be more than happy to answer them. Give me a call. I don't care if you have my phone number. I think this is a great opportunity. It's something I'd like to pursue. Like I said, I went out the door and I thought I was, well, my wife said, let's give it time and a try. 1 month into it, I knew I was in over my head, especially when it started snowing and I put the bike away, because it was my hobby, you know, I had no more riding. So it's definitely time for me to get back into it and see what I do. Mass has a mandatory retirement at 65, so I'd like to think I can do another 10 standing on my head. The goal was originally to do 40 years. I kind of got soured at the last place, so I had 33 could have been the cutoff, but I'd like to do another 10. So this is an interim. I also put in for the full-time spot, so I figured this would be a good stepping stone, at least an opportunity for you to get to know me to get to know what the town is, and you folks and what to expect of me. Kind of kick the tires a little bit on both ends, both parties, and see where it goes from that. If not, at the very least, I get to be part of helping another community along for a 6-month period. And I guess it's up to 6 months, so it could be shorter, but whatever the period may be, it's an opportunity for me to maybe help some younger officers and be involved in the community.
Do you have any questions of us?
One question I would have is, as an interim chief, is this just a filler position, to just kind of hold down the fort until you do get the full-time officer, chief in place, or is this something where you're looking for the chief to be interactive, proactive, new programs, whatever the case may be? Because obviously if whoever gets it and doesn't get the full-time spot, walks away after 5 months and they start a program, that program usually will fail, because it needs to be fed. Programs do.
So, I'll start to address that, and I will also let the town administrator chime in, and other board members. It would be, management of some administrative, tasks that are before the police chief, to help us through this time period. But I believe that the position would be as what a full-time police chief would be. I mean, you'd be working full-time, so if there's an initiative, that hasn't been over in the department and doesn't cost anything, because I'll throw that out there, it's a very lean budget. I'm sure working with the town administrator, you'd be able to present something to the Board of Selectmen to implement. So I guess I was very careful with the way I answered this, but I don't know, Dave, if you would want to add anything.
I'll throw it right at you, Chief. I need a command staff assessment. I need to rebuild the command staff. We're going to need an assessment of the skill set of our younger officers, but particularly looking at our shifts and mentorship. The department is incredibly young, and we need some stability over there. We need some mentorship, and we need to rebuild that command staff. we need somebody to go in there and just take a look behind the curtain, see what's going on, see where the problems are, see what's being done well, see where we need to improve, and go from there. It's not a babysitting position. You'll have full disciplinary authority, full working with me, change policy, procedure, updates, whatever needs to be done, like start to get the department on a roadmap to stability and to continue to make it the best department Friendship has.
Okay.
You'll be busy.
That was my concern, is that, you know, if it was just a filler position, I don't think it's really gonna help anybody, no matter who you pick and how long of a period of time it is. Some departments, some towns have done that over the past. I just need someone for 3 months to run the show and do some paperwork and sign the paperwork. I know a lot of your command staff has already left. Your lieutenant is retired, your senior sergeant just retired.
Yeah. We have one sergeant, very experienced, and then the next sergeant behind that, a lot of potential, strong, but still on the young side. And then from there, incredibly young part. We have some excellent instructors, some great skill sets. But we've got it, I would look at it, Chief, as almost 6 months of a consulting position. Take a good snapshot at it and get us to rebuild some of that. You'll probably be engaged with a sergeant assessment, this is the provision in our CDA. We started with Wayne Brown, or Wayne Sampson, excuse me.
Yep.
To do a sergeant assessment. We've got to look at whether or not we should use the lieutenant model or sergeant model. So we've got some of that rebuild to do. The department is stable, it's functioning, but we do have some manpower concerns over there, so we should have stabilized the volume of hiring, the attrition.
Yeah, I think you have a great organization over there. You know, except the chief, the conversation I had with the chief were great. He knows his stuff, the things he was putting in place and the discussions we had. He was dotting all the I's. You're very well funded. The officers don't seem to want for anything. Well, I shouldn't say that every officer wants. There's always something, but as far as the department goes, you know, you're very well equipped. Your facility is very strong. That's huge. Losing your command staff, I think that's fixable. It's just a matter of taking the time and, you know, not jumping. Sometimes people jump and they say, well, I need a lieutenant now. You need a lieutenant who can do the job. You just don't grab someone and throw them into that position. So I think that's great. I think whoever comes in has a lot to work with. I see success, and you're on track for what you just said. So not that you needed to hear that from me.
No.
Listen to it. You have a plan, which is nice. Plans are always nice, and you're definitely on point with that. So.
And to clarify, we went forward with an interim position. Chief Tarsa had provided us with a 6-month notice of his retirement. We are doing our best to honor his wishes. He's staying a little bit longer to help us out. COVID kind of threw a curveball at all of us. We had a process that we started in February with a screening committee, and I know that you were part of that pool of applicants. But we just felt like we couldn't do a thorough public process that we wanted to have a few candidates meet members of the community and members of the public face to face, and we felt that an interim position would give us some time to allow us to have that process the way that we had envisioned it from day one. And so this gives us time, but it also allows the interim candidate to apply for that as well. So I just wanted to clarify that's why we've gone this route.
I should also add too, we're gonna probably have the interim chief certainly take a policy review, take a look at our policies, see what we have, be updated, and give us a good snapshot of where we stand with that.
Have you folks looked at certification or accreditation?
I have not had that conversation with the chief.
I'm a big fan of accreditation. Mass is nice because you have a 2-step process. You have the certification first, brings you 2/3 of the way there. State accreditation, which dots all the I's, crosses the T's, reduces your liability, cuts down on your insurance, gets everyone on the same page. I'm a strong advocate for that. So regardless of what happens here, take it for what it's worth. I would definitely go down that road. It can be expensive at times. You're, depending on, you know, everything from your impound lot, well, is it just a place where you park the cars? Well, now it needs to be fenced in. So you're gonna spend a little bit of money here and there. But the savings in the long run, not to mention, you don't end up, or you have a less of a chance of ending up with a children. So he's gonna cost Minneapolis a lot of money. And I'd rather spend $2,000 on a new fence or a little thing here or there, than have the insurance company cut a check for $2 million, if not more. But just take it for what it's worth. I'm a big proponent for that, so it's never a bad thing.
Anything else? Or anything else from anyone? Okay.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you, and as we talked on Monday, we are moving through the process relatively quickly. We do, hope to be in touch with each of the candidates next week to just share what steps are next.
Okay.
Okay? So
Great.
it's kind of our timing at this point. All right.
I
Well,
would
thank
shake hands, but have a COVID day.
Yes. Feel free to take a bottle of water if you would like.
No, I'm good, I've got this.